I got some things I want to do too. I mean, thank you. Well, they should be a little more flexible than me. Yeah, I mean, maybe not so strict. Maybe there's a second tier or a third tier.
If everyone could have their seats, we're going to be starting momentarily.
Good, Paul? You're the boss.
All right, thanks. Well, there he is. And then, website that I could have just done the wrong one. So we're. What is this? For an APH?
I have to.
We just passed that.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnebago County Board meeting. Tonight is Thursday, September 8th, 2022. Tonight, the invocation and pledge allegiance is by Board Member Jim Webster. Please stand.
Lord, thank you for gathering us here this evening to do the work of the people that we were elected to do, and we get paid for to do the work of the people. And thank you, Lord, for blessing us here in Winnebago County with the most fabulous weather ever, in spite of the fact that around the country people are suffering through floods, fires, elevated temperatures everywhere. And I just feel we are so blessed, and we need to thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I would like to ask the board if we could have a moment of silence tonight for Laurie Mitchell, who passed away Sunday, September 4th. She served 4 terms as village clerk for McChesney Park and was very active in our community. She started Fisher's Ministry, which provided outreach to inmates. She was very active in her church, Bethany Presbyterian in Loves Park. She served on the board at Rock Valley Credit Union. There will be many more details coming about her memorial soon. Our condolences to the Mitchell family. If everyone could please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I don't believe we have any agenda announcements this evening. Clerk Gumau, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Neighbors.
Here.
Mrs. Red. Mr. Delgado. Mr. Schultz. Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Webster. Mr. Westcott.
Present.
Mr. Arena. Here. Mr. Booker. Present. Mr. Butita.
Here.
Mrs. Crosby.
Here.
Ms. Fellers.
Here.
Mr. Girl.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel.
Present.
Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Lindmark.
Present.
Mr. McCarthy.
Present.
Mr. McDonald.
Present.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, that's 20 board members present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum this evening. All right, we'll move on to our agenda. Number 5 is awards, presentations, public hearings, public participation, and proclamation. We do have 2 speakers this evening for public participation. just read a statement here. The total time for public comment will be limited to 21 minutes, provided for as many speakers as the total time limit will permit. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Visual aids are not permitted, but handouts may be provided to staff for distribution. It is recommended that a minimum of 24 copies be provided. Speakers may not address personal matters, pending or threatened litigation, or zoning matters which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personal attacks or inappropriate language will not be permitted. The chairperson will determine the sequential order of speakers. So our first speaker is Reverend Earl Dotson Sr.
The Bible. Eager to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, there is one body and one Spirit. Just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of us all, who is above all and through all and in all. This Pauline thought gives a complete doctrine of history and of human thought. We are reminded of unity among men, which is presented to us with compelling urgency and which we desperately need, for we either unite or we perish because of tragic divisions that can only be healed by unity in God. America's single largest challenge is domestic problems, as seen in a dysfunctional political system, especially its legislative bodies, where black misrepresentation is outrageous, bordering cluelessness and irrelevance. There is a decline in public morals, institutionalized and legalized racism and corruption, a poorly educated and attention deficit bound electorate. All of this amidst the renewed threat last week by Communist China to retake Taiwan by force, destroying America's economy, while millions of Americans, many evangelical Christians, seek a civil war. Imagine an army called to fight a foe, one within and one without. Unite or perish. I am compelled by the one hope mentioned to press for the release of the hundreds of millions of dollars needed that we will get to resurrect Westside Rockford, especially reopening church school and an adjacent research and development facility, bringing wealth to this neglected community with highly skilled workmen and highly paid jobs, and an abundance of black Einsteins benefiting the commonweal. Yet there is blind intransigence, and it abounds. Abe Lincoln is right. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I close with this theme song from the Civil Rights Movement. The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe the Lord will see us through someday.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to acknowledge that we have many Winnebago County employees that are in our chambers this evening that are represented by AFSCME. So our next speaker is Michael Delgado. Please come forward.
Chairman, County Board, thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to touch on a few things. Most of you guys know me, but I'm going to go ahead with this. Good evening. My name is Michael Delgado. I'm a correctional officer at the Winnebago County Jail and president of AFSCME Local 473. Our local union represents county corrections officers, caregivers at River Bluff, the staff at the county administration building, the employees of the County Highway Department, Animal Services, telecommunicators at County 911 Center, and deputy coroners. These are members of Local 473, and they have shown up for work day in, day out during the worst of the pandemic. We sacrificed our health, even risked bringing home COVID home to our families, to serve the residents of our county. Through it all, county services never missed a beat. As you all know, we are currently bargaining our new union contract. While some progress has been made, the county's current proposals would result in hard-working Winnebago County employees actually losing ground economically. We are here today to raise awareness among the county board members and the general public. We're asking for livable wages here, whether it's River Bluff, County Highway. I've got people making $10, $11 an hour, and it's hard to sustain with a gallon of milk costing $6 now. Fuel prices are crazy. We got a lot of single mom and dads, married families, and it's rough right now. We're just asking for a good living wage and keep working for the county, keep things going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Okay, moving on, our agenda is the approval of minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 11th, 2022, and layover of the August 25th, 2022 minutes. Motion by Mr. Lindmark, second by Mr. Neighbors. Is there any discussion on the approval and layover of the minutes? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to that motion? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Number 7 is the consent agenda, which includes the raffle report and the auditor's report. May I entertain a motion, please? Mr. Hoffman, motion, second by Mr. Tassoni. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to that motion? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. All right. We have no appointments to read in this evening. We have reports of standing committees. First committee is the Finance Committee. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you.
But there's over 400 cards here signed by people in support of our union to help us get a better contract. And I would appreciate if you guys took the time to look into it.
Thank you.
We want to be equal to other counties, especially within our area. We're at mega jail.
Thank you.
Over 700. We have approximately
Ma'am?
100 people in jail right now for murder.
Ma'am, unfortunately,
We see it every day. Thank you.
thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 3 items tonight. The first one's a resolution authorizing execution of hourly wage increase for certified nursing assistants at River Bluff Nursing Home, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Delgado, second by Mr. Hoffman. Discussion.
Now, this is just a $2.50 increase for the CNAs out at River Bluff.
Is there any board member discussion this evening? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this motion, this resolution? All right, hearing none, please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution to fund the suicide prevention with mental health board funds, and I so move.
Motion by Mr. Delgado. Is there a second? Mr. Earl seconds that motion.
Yes, and I'd like to make an amendment to that based on Ms. Vaughn's interpretation of that everybody received in their emails about us not having authority to take it out of the mental health board fund. So I'd like to make that amendment and actually strike the mental health board and use the art funds, and I so move.
We have an amendment by Mr. Delgado and a second for the amendment to strike the mental health board funds out of the resolution and include the ARP funding. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? Mr. Earl. Mr. Earl. Discussion. Mr. Lindmark.
Yeah, I've been involved a little bit, went to a couple of Laura's Marshmallow Hope events. She's came to a couple of our Greg Lindmark Foundation events. I highly recommend the passing of this. I will be abstaining in the vote, She is in it for the right reasons. There's no duplication of services. They have in their handbook for being very careful with suicidal mentors, with suicidal children. There's actually established rules for that. I've brought this to our counselors at the Greg Lindmark Foundation, and she has spoken with them. Our 6 counselors unanimously thought it was a great idea. Nothing like this has been done in this area. Out east at Edwards Air Force Base, it was done with raving reviews, the mentorship program. This woman's heart is in the right place, and it is much needed service. I fully support it. I hope all of you do too. I will be abstaining in the vote, just to be careful. There's not a conflict, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. Discussion, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At committee last week, I was the one who requested that the funds come from the Mental Health Fund. Frankly, this is a situation where I feel that the Finance Committee members, at least my feeling, is got caught between the Mental Health Board and this entity and Marlena Dawkin in her presentation and advocacy for it. I'm not faulting either party, but different information was coming from both of those sources, and for myself, at least personally, that created confusion. I think it's obviously a very emotional issue. It's one that we all care about deeply. We want to make sure that we're getting the services provided for people that are in need. I still believe that the proper funding source for this is the $20 million balance that's in the Mental Health Fund, but I will, in spite of that concern, I'll be voting for this.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Board member discussion on the amendment, Mr. Arena and then Mr. Neighbors.
Just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, we had a packet put in our desk, printed, and I'm wondering, is this different than what's the packet that was posted online? Is this just for our reference, or is there some change in the sub-agreement information?
Yeah, just to answer that question, it would be a change on the funding source based on what was posted out there on the website. So that's why I amended it based on this portion. And all it is from my understanding, and I'll hand it over to Ms. Vaughn or whoever drafted this addendum to it. My assumption is that it's just replacing the art funds versus the mental health board funds.
So I'm referring to the ARP sub-recipient agreement. Nothing beyond the funding source is different in this packet that was placed on our desks, right?
So I'll let Marlena Dawkin speak to it.
Sure, that is just the original agreement that was submitted to the Finance Committee before the Mental Health Board funds were mentioned. I wanted to give you a clean copy of what that looked like because it was suggested that what was in your packet was a marked up version. So that's just the original. The only thing that's changed is that the funding source is back to what was originally submitted. And of course, the agreement changed because of that, so the language changed, and it's the old agreement. It's the original submitted agreement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, and I just want to comment that I would encourage the Mental Health Board to establish some type of an appeal process so that in the future, applicants to that board for the mental health funds aren't returning, coming to the county board looking for us to second guess those decisions. Because I think the Mental Health Board are the people who are properly equipped to make these decisions and not necessarily the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neighbors.
So, being a part of the Mental Health Board, we certainly want the best programs for, the people in our community, and we really have a passion, we want to prevent suicide, but we want to have good programs in our community. And it was I did the same thing on the mental health board as the county board did. I saw suicide prevention, and I went with my emotion. I gave it 100%. But the doctors on there, I want the board to be careful because the doctors on the committee had reservations about the program. One of the comments was, it appears one of the key practices, ACE, that is involved with the program has not been determined to be evidence-based in youth. So with that being said, they felt it would be risky to put youth with at-risk adults. The other part of it, so there is no accreditation period for either the county or Marshmallow with risk management. And one of the things we ask is for your risk management policy. And so we didn't see any risk management policy, so we also assumed that it'd be possible for the county to be liable for litigation if they go with this program. So it was unclear if this is a third-party program or is this a county program. And so that's another reason why we let it go. And another comment was, I do not understand how the county will oversee a program being offered by a third-party provider. Is the county simply the fiscal agent, or there will be actual oversight? Will the third-party contractor be required to process accreditations of some sort of training? And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I have 6 pages of comments on why they felt the program was a risk to the youth. Even though it's a good idea, they just felt that the program was risky and it would be risky for the county to take that program on. You vote however you want, but we do want good programs, but we want the county to be safe as well. And with that being said, the county has already had great programs put in place for suicide prevention. You got the co-responder program, then we added with Rosecrans, the 24-hour resource center. And it's not like it's not a duplication. It doesn't say suicide on there, but we've already put in measures along with the programs that the county has already established. And the county has great programs already. It's just this one was questionable. And so I know everybody wants to prevent suicide, but be careful with voting with your emotions.
Thank you, Mr. Neighbors. Ms. Red. Ms. Red.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Neighbors, did I understand you say the program is not accredited?
Said I don't know if it's accredited or not, but in the application, it didn't have the accreditations in the application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Red. Board members? Mr. Linmark.
Yeah, I understand the apprehension. You hear a lot of stuff about Rosecrans. Great program. I'm not knocking Rosecrans. They have over 50 children on the waiting list alone at Marshmallows Hope. They had 2 instances where they went for counseling. The children thought they were going to commit suicide, felt like they were going to, went to a counselor in December. They couldn't be seen until June. Both tried to commit suicide. People say 50 kids. Well, 50 kids, counting family members, friends, relatives, everybody that it affects, you're probably talking over 500 to 1,000 people. So don't look at just 50 kids. 50 is enough. I get it. But accreditation, I thought you did say that, Mr. Neighbors, that they weren't. I don't know. I couldn't hear a lot of what you were saying. Maybe you could clarify that. I thought you did with Dorothy, but I really couldn't hear. Thank you.
Mr. Neighbors?
To response to what he said, Winnebago County does not have the whole entire county does not have one pediatric psychiatrist in it, and this program does not solve that issue.
Okay. You want to restate that? He was having a hard time hearing you.
I said the entire county of Winnebago does not have one pediatric psychiatrist, and this does not solve that issue.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may, I'd like to give the floor to Marlene Dockin to kind of explain how the county is involved and how marshmallows became a third party, if they are a third party. Walk us down that line, and can you explain a little bit about the evidence-based inexperience or whatever from that perspective? And I yield to her.
Sure, I'll just talk about what's been brought up as barriers to overcome. And that is, number one, the accreditation. The question on the application was, what is the accreditation that the applicant has? I was the applicant. I was applying on their behalf because she had not been in business for, I believe it's 3 years that they have to be in business, and she had only been in business 2. So I applied and answered that question based on who we were as the applicant. So that's why there's no accreditation. I did answer it and say, you know, as the county, we, you know, different departments have different accreditations, but nothing related to this. What I do with anything that comes out of my office for risk management is I submit a risk assessment for any grant that I write. And if there's anything that appears to be a risk, that gets written into the contract in an addendum if it's not already there. And I think I pretty much covered everything in hers, but the second question was, is it evidence-based? Well, the program is mentoring combined with a therapist, and the therapist is from KP Counseling. Kevin Polke is a reputable therapist. He has a reputable organization, and mentoring is evidence-based. Has anybody ever done it for suicide prevention? That I don't know. However, it'd be nice if we could put something out from our community that might say, well, maybe this is part of the problem. Kids don't have anybody to connect with. I don't know that, but I know that there's no harm in mentoring. And certainly the mentors of the law enforcement would not be people who were at risk, meaning they were actively ready to commit suicide. This is similar to if you're looking at a medical model and you have diabetes in your family and you're at risk for diabetes, you're going to be careful about what is in your diet. And just as somebody who is somebody who's going to see multiple suicides and a lot of things that are very traumatic, it's in their best interest to do things that are tailored to them that might help them build protective factors. That's all that is. Not every officer is going to choose to do that, but somebody who might want to might say, you know what, that's the route I want to go. They also offer through the Lindmark Foundation, any officer that wants to talk things out, they do have free counseling through the Lindmark Foundation. But again, it's not that, you know, these kids are going to be paired with people who are, you know, just, you know, got out of the hospital and you know, we're threatening suicide. These are going to be proactive measures so that the officers never, ever get to that place. And the reason, number one, the important thing is that she thought of when she decided to go after first responders was because during her grieving, she realized that she saw it one time, and it was horrible. And she told me, she said, I remember all of the first responders that had to come in and see my son like that. And she said, and I thought of all of the other people that they have to see like that. And she said that's why she decided to do it. And you know, so that it works, it's working with the veterans. They really like it out at Edwards, or not the veterans, but the service members at Edwards Air Force Base. And the sheriff is you know, letting her present at roll calls to get officers who might be interested. They do go through a mentoring training, and it's virtual due to COVID right now, and to be helpful for their schedule because they do have, you know, different shifts. And those are just some of the things that I know about it. But again, yeah, they'll be reporting, they'll be quarterly reporting through my office. And if they choose to bill monthly, they can bill monthly, but they do have to show their invoices. They have to show any receipts, any and all receipts have to be, are the ones that are itemized in the budget that's in the contract. So nothing can be submitted that's not written in the budget. And same with time. If your best practices are with time, is that you either submit 100% time certification and you sign it, or if you're working on multiple projects, you submit a timesheet that shows the multiple projects that you're working on. So that's what they'll be doing.
Thank you. Ms. Gorel.
I have several questions. I'm for this. Marlena, do they really at this time need startup money? And then maybe next year when they have their 3 years in and they show that they have a footprint, would that help if we did part of the ARP to get them started? And then maybe when the 3 years or so are up, they can come back and show us, this is what we've done, this is who we worked with, and then try to apply through the mental health committee.
Right, and she does intend to, that's what her intention is, but due to the performance year of the mental health board, we'd have to submit her application in, I think it's January, it opens in December. So there won't be any data to show right now, but next year there will be. In 2023, she'll be able to say, you know, all of 2023 I did this, and I had talked to Jason at R1 before and said, if we do find funding for her under another source, you know, would you be willing to share information, data points that would be relevant and important to your board? And he said he would. I said, because I could have her submit a whole bunch of data, but if it's not the type of data that you're looking for, then it's not helpful. So he said that he would do that, but.
First of all, for many years, we have needed child psychiatrists, and no one can afford to have them. And it's the children who are suffering so bad from this. They live in toxic situations. We don't know, you know, there's so much out there that these children are against, that they are no longer children. They're adults when they're born. And that's not fair. And somehow, someday, we need to get those psychiatrists in here, because those kids, they're our future. And everything is just going down the drain. It's not fair. It just isn't. Our first responders, I have to agree with you on what they see and what they don't. My brother-in-law was a fireman. And I also am very familiar with Greg's brother and what he had gone through and what they see as police officers. It's unbelievable what they go through and bring home every night. And those things have to be addressed. And we don't have enough, we do not have enough mental consultants here for what we truly, truly need that no one wants to talk about. And remember, every day we have children who come out of the womb who are already high on narcotics. And you know, the average person doesn't know this. They don't live it, they don't know it. And the other thing, many of the people in this room don't understand how a grant works. That you apply today, but you don't get it probably for a year because of the processes you go through before you give out a grant. You just don't give everybody and anyone a grant. And the board that we have right now is very efficient in that, to making sure those who truly need it and have the footprint are the ones who will get the grants. And the other thing is that we have to stop thinking, well, have they have done this, or if they were a different family and all this stuff. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. It comes from all walks of life. There is no certain walk of life it doesn't come from. And so if they have some type of accreditation, they might not have the full amount, but they have the people ready and in line. This is something we should look at. And the way that grant works, I understand that it won't be available for a year. And then I don't believe they get it in cash. I believe it goes into a fund. And as they use the money, and would you explain that to the board? As they use the money, then they apply to that savings that's there. They might have a wonderful reserve, but what is that reserve for? It's covering all these grants that they have given out, and during the next year, they will be paying out of that reserve for the people who have applied and were accepted for these grants. That money's not theirs. It belongs to the people who applied for the grants and will be using that money. It's not 20 million that they just get and can go out and party with. It's all accounted for. And many of the people on this board do not understand that, or they don't want to understand that. And so I'm ready for the art, because that is a public service. And we need to start remembering we are not corporate America. We are a public service. That's what government is. It's for the people, by the people, and those are the ones we have to service. And it's too bad, because we need child psychiatrists in this community. We need them all over the country, and we don't have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goro. Ms. Fellers.
I'm the mother of 3 children that are in the age group that is the target for this. All 3 of my children, they're 9, 10, and 13. And I see great value in this program for suicide prevention, and I'm excited about the intention of this program. But I have deep reservations based on Mr. Neighbor's comments and the questions of accreditation. I also have reservations being that this does not address the shortage of mental health providers in Winnebago County. And I'd like to discuss sending it back to committee so that we can get answers to those questions as to whether or not they're accredited, whether or not they're insured. Are these licensed clinical social workers? Are they lay people and volunteers? I'd like to have answers to those things before we entrust our children to them.
Okay, so what we have before us right now is a discussion on the amendment to the original resolution. Are you bringing forward another motion to send this back to?
Is it proper to do that now, or do we do that after?
I believe we do it after the amendment. So we'll continue discussion on the amendment. Is there any other board member discussion on the amendment? One more time, Mr. Lindmark.
I just wanted to mention that all of our 6 counselors we use in our foundation are all licensed professionals. We're all in agreement with this. Stand 100% behind it. I also campaigned for the mental health tax. I am 100% behind the mental health board. But how long are we going to mess around with this and send it here or there? The ARP funds are there. It was in phase 4. We're talking about children. So many times I hear in this room about the children. What are we doing for children? Let's do something for the children, the parents and the families. It's a big problem in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. Any other board member discussion on the amendment to this resolution? To strike the mental health board funds and to include the American Recovery Program funding. All right, are there any board members opposed to this amendment? Hearing none, please cast a yes for all members present. So the resolution has been amended. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So therefore, I move to approve, but I'll defer to Ms. Fellers.
I'd like to motion that this go back to committee for further review.
All right, there's a motion to send this resolution back to committee for further review. Is there a second? Mr. Neighbors, seconds. Any discussion on this motion to send this back to committee? Are there any board members opposed to that motion? All right, so I don't think we need a roll call on that. Looks like that failed, I believe. Ms. Clerk, you believe that failed also?
Yes, do we need to do a roll call?
Let's just do a roll call.
Let's just do a roll call on it.
Just more than 3?
Yeah.
I missed something. She made it in.
We'll start with Mrs. Red.
Repeat the statement, please. What are we voting on? I'm sorry.
You're voting on to send this back to committee.
Back to committee.
No,
Thank you.
Wait.
Yeah,
I thought
that
it-
was what your motion
I
was.
thought it was shut down.
No, we're going to take a roll call just to
okay.
do that.
On sending
Okay,
it back to
yes.
committee.
Your vote is yes. Okay.
Mr. Delgado,
No.
Mr. Schultz,
No.
Mr. Sweeney,
I'm sorry, just to clarify, we were talking, this is to fund the program and move forward with the program?
Send it back.
send it back
This is to
committee.
send it back to
No.
committee.
Mr. Tassoni,
No.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott,
No.
Mr. Arena?
No.
Mr. Booker?
No.
Mr. Butita?
No.
Mrs. Crosby?
Yes.
Ms. Fellers?
Yes.
Mr. Gurl?
No.
Mrs. Gorel?
No.
Mr. Hoffman?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
No.
Mr. Lindmark?
I abstain.
Mr. McCarthy?
No.
Mr. McDonald?
No.
Mr. Chairman, that's 3 yes, 16 no, and 1 abstention.
Very good. The motion fails. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I therefore move to approve the resolution.
Did we vote?
Mr.
Mr. Neighbors.
Mr. Neighbors?
I didn't? I apologize. Mr. Neighbors?
Yes.
I apologize, Mr. Neighbors. So that would be 14, I'm sorry, can we start over tonight? 4 yes, 15 no, 1 abstention.
Very good. Motion fails. Mr. Salgado.
So now I'd like to move to approve resolution for the fund suicide prevention with ARP funds, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Salgado, second by Mr. Hoffman. Is there discussion? Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question would be directed to the State's Attorney's Office. Are you aware of any liability the county would assume by diverting these monies to this program?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not aware at this moment of any liability. This is the first time that I was made aware by Mr. Neighbors that there was a concern from the Mental Health Board. So if the board wants more information about that, I would have to look into it.
Thank you.
Mr. Neighbors.
So there was, Ms. Marlena clarified that because she said it would be a third-party vendor and it wouldn't be up under the county's thing. So I'm fine with the liability as long as they have their own liability and it's not a part of the county. So that's okay. When she said she just did it up under the, when she said she filled it out as if she was filling out the application for herself. So that's where the concerns came in. So now that she's clarifying and saying that it's the just third party, the third party should have their own insurance.
Very good. Mr. Arena.
All right, just, so the sub-agreement specifically says that the recipient agrees to defend, identify, and hold the county harmless, and then they have budgeted for insurance. So there, with that structure in place, is there really a scenario that could develop where we would ever be liable, no matter what happens? Isn't that completely protect us?
It should.
Okay, but, all right. Yeah, obviously, there could be something that we just never, but yeah, I also feel comfortable with our exposure. Thank you.
Good. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Mr. Neighbors this evening. You kind of indicated that you've learned new things, and I'm hoping that you can return to the Mental Health Board and discuss an appeals program or a way to seek further information to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that make sure we do get good help to the people that need it. I appreciate your honesty on that, Mr. Neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Further board member discussion? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this amended resolution? Hearing none, please cast a yes for all members present. Thank you. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bearing with me on this. Our last item is annual appropriation ordinance. This is to be laid over. Just real quick, a little discussion here. So last Finance Committee, I'll give the floor to Mr. Schultz, just what transpired there so everybody's aware of what this ordinance is right now and where the budget sits for next year. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Schultz if you want to just, on your motion that we voted on and it got passed through. Because I just don't want to put words that, obviously aren't what they are, so.
sorry, Mr. Delgado, what are you referring to specifically?
Yes, the ordinance, we amended, because if you recall, the way the budget is currently, originally it had that tax levy increase, right? And so I just want to, and then obviously the way that budget, so I just want them to understand, board members, what this is, because it was amended at finance, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Delgado, for that jogging of my memory. So it's public knowledge that Mr. Earl, Mr. McDonald, and myself put a press release out asking our fellow county board members to put a freeze on our property taxes with the exception of new growth. And so that was made public. We presented a rationale along with that press release. We're looking at extraordinary economic situation for our people, our taxpayers. We understand that in Illinois, we pay more taxes than the rest of the country, pretty much universally true. We have an extensive burden on folks, on families, on people that are still out of work in a challenging environment. So that was the foundation of saying, if there's any year that we would put a freeze on real estate taxes, this would be the year. In addition to that, we also were told by Mr. Rickard that we have a substantial fund balance. That came about because of ARP funds and other state revenue that was way in excess of what we thought it would be when we developed this year's budget, which is a repeat of what we found in last year's performance against budget, where we were way ahead. We're grateful for that economic blessing and the benefits of that, and how, frankly, after years of deficit spending and drawing down our fund balances, because of these extraordinary income items, we're now back on our feet and we have a surplus position. So that was the second part of the rationale. Our people are hurting and we have the money from other sources. Let's do a one-year freeze. And that was what I motioned and was passed, I think 5-2 by the Finance Committee. And so that's the amendment that is not reflected, I think, in these big red binders, but it was passed at the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. That's exactly what I just wanted him. I didn't want to put additional commentary in there, but that's currently where we sit at. Mr. Rickard, correct? We're good?
Correct, and I'm available for any questions. I'll very quickly, we're right on schedule with our calendar. This is the point in the process where we lay it over. We're going to have a Finance Committee on the 22nd. I request that if you have any amendments to the budget, to please get them in by that time, so the Finance Committee, I can bring it to Finance Committee that night, and they can review it, and we can review any amendments to the budget going forward. I'd appreciate that, and I know the Finance Committee would appreciate that. And I will point out, too, that it's been an extraordinarily good year the last several years on the revenue standpoint. I've pointed out a number of the area of concerns I have to the Finance Committee, probably ad nauseum, but I at least want them to be aware of some of the clouds in the horizon, just to be aware of that. And I think they weighed all the facts and made their decision. So I think it's a good budget. I appreciate all the cooperation from the elected officials and department heads. There's still opportunity to make adjustments. There will be some areas of the budget where we'll come back with certain amendments. One of them will be to make some adjustments with River Bluff in order to fully carry out the wishes of the Finance Committee with how they presented the budget levy. So we'll make some adjustments and present that to the board to put them in a position where they're going to be able to function appropriately and have the necessary resources. I believe the board is considering some adjustments with the Transportation Department, and you know, that's pretty much where we're at. Plus, there are a lot of numerous housekeeping and timing issues that are that you're going to have at any time. We'll group them all in one category, mainly with the timing of expenditures, the timing of revenues, and a whole host of other minor things that we make adjustments at this time of year. But those will be presented at the night of the vote as an amendment, so you'll have a list of options to choose from with which amendments to add to the final budget to approve. But right now, your purpose tonight is to simply lay the budget over, allow for public display, and we'll take some time to review it and make any recommendations in accordance with the board's wishes. Ms. Laurel.
I have had so many telephone calls. I was at the doctor, walked out of the lab, and here sits one of our past board members' wife sitting there, and he was a board member that always said, you can't raise the taxes, you gotta think about the people, don't raise the taxes. I mean, we listened to that for years with him. And she got all over me saying, why did you even put that on a ballot if you were gonna do it your way anyway? What good was my vote? She wasn't the only one. I've had all kinds of calls. I've had all kinds of people stop me that I don't even know, saying, why are they going to freeze that levy when we voted for it now? And Mr. Schultz, as I remember, your favorite word is quit kicking things down, quit kicking the can down the street. This is one of those things, because this levy is going to get kicked down, kicked down, kicked down, until you take it and use it for something else, and we still don't have the sustainability that you want for River Bluff. They still need to get their reserve going that they don't have. And that's a sin. We have given the public the opinion that we do what we want to do. We don't care what they say. And I don't want to hear it's an advisory. I want to know one advisory that ever went up and was voted on that this board didn't accept the voters' suggestions or their vote. This one you really followed up with by going ahead and saying right away after that levy passed that we're going to just freeze it and hold it on, you know. Come on, guys. That's an excuse to have that levy come on, and in the future, River Bluff will still have problems. We've already had nursing homes knocking on our doors saying that, how many of your residents would you like us to take? Well, most of them are Medicaid. Oh, well, maybe we can take your health. I want all three of you that have voted on, that have put that in the newspaper, you opened a can of worms and you don't even know it. But you're coming up for election. And they need to know that much of this is political. It's not for the benefit of River Bluff or for this county. Think about it. When you go back to vote, you can say anything you want, but that's the truth. And don't kick that can down that street anymore.
Squirrel, thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to respond. I mean, I respectfully disagree, obviously, with Ms. Gorel. We have reserved $10 million that has not been officially transferred, as I understand it, to the River Bluff Nursing Home. But out of the general fund balance, we have reserved $10 million that reflects the negative cash flow that is in the River Bluff's experience. If we were to actually move that money, which eventually has to happen, because there's no other source for that $10 million of net cash flow deficit to be replenished, eventually, when that is moved over into the River Bluff Nursing Home Fund, they are going to have a positive reserve. They're going to have a positive net balance. So it's just a function of time before the accounting is done on that. But the reserve was required by our auditors and was required by our internal folks. And so they're not in as bad a situation as it appears in terms of the current fund balance. In addition, what we've been hearing from lots of folks that are in leadership around River Bluff is things are getting better. We know that we've given them new tools so that their billing system is vastly improved. We know that we're working on getting the staff what they need so that they have the resources to have as many people in that facility as possible. And so there's hope at this point that the operations are going to improve, and as the operations improve, the finances are also going to improve. So I feel attacked, frankly, by what you said, Ms. Gorel.
That's fine.
But I think there's reason to be positive. I think there's reason to be hopeful. There are reserves that have already been set aside that directly benefit River Bluff. And I think there's reason for us at this point to say, with all of that in place, let's care for our taxpayers under unusual circumstances and let's look out for them. That's not kicking the can down the road. That's recognizing that we're in an unusually positive situation as it relates to our finances, and so we can afford to do this.
Very good. I'm going to go to Mr. Arena first. Squirrel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate Ms. Gorel's passion for protecting River Bluff. I also think it's an important service that we provide. I don't view it as us being in a business of the nursing home business. We're there, it's there to provide opportunities for people who wouldn't have them elsewhere. So it's important to me, but I do agree with what the decisions has been made not to increase the levy. And I think that if that referendum had been written where it said, would you support a tax increase even though we don't need the money, it wouldn't have passed. When the decision was made to put that on the ballot, we were under the impression that we were not going to get extra money this year like we did last year. So we were acting then with the information that was in front of us, but the situation has changed. So, and it's also important to note that, you know, we didn't just ignore entirely the results of the referendum. Rather than saying we're not going to do it at all, we're saying we're going to freeze for 1 year, and hopefully a year from now, gas prices will have settled down, inflation will have settled down, and we can better evaluate River Bluff's financial circumstances to see, do we need it or not? But I think that everyone I've talked to on this board is fully committed to continuing the operation of River Bluff. So, you know, I don't see an urgency in collecting those extra tax dollars now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rita. Ms. Goro.
You know, I've lived long enough to know that we go flat, and then all of a sudden we have a recession, and I've been through about 3 recessions. What we're going through right now is not new. We've had these, I don't know, since I've been born, probably 5 of them. I've also lost my savings because of when the real estate market fell out in the 2000s, the beginning. Here I am with my savings all gone. I understand that. But I also understand that when we get extra money, it burns a hole in our pocket. That shouldn't happen, because then we go out and we spend all this money, and then all of a sudden we're back going down again. And we're broke again. We're back in the same old situation. What you all asked me for was sustainability, and you got it. And now you're throwing it away. That's what I'm angry. Oh, yes, you are. Because you're going to find someplace else to put that money, because you might not be on the board 4 years from now, and they're going to take that levy and put it someplace else. It needs to go where it needs to go right now, not down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Petita.
Thank you. So, you know, if I, as the author, or I'm not the author, as the sponsor of a resolution to put the referendum on the ballot, if I had known, if Mr. Rickard had come to me and told me that we were going to have this surplus of money, I would never ask for that referendum to be brought forward. It didn't make any sense. If we had the money to fund River Bluff, why ask a referendum? So as a sponsor, you know, I didn't realize it at the time, nor did any of us, that we were going to have a surplus of funds. So I think as a, you know, we have a responsibility here to our community, and I think all our taxpayers deserve our consideration too. If we have the opportunity to hold the taxes down, and that's fine. Now, we can hold, you know, River Bluff is still operating with an operational deficit. So those are the things that we need to work on to turn that around, so that the River Bluff is not dependent on the general fund. Or, you know, if that's not the case, if we can't get that done, then next year we can certainly increase our tax levy with no problem at all. So I feel very comfortable with voting in favor of this budget as it stands now. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. McDonald and back to Ms. Goro for one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand why people aren't excited. We asked, should we keep River Bluff open? And it was a yes vote. And we are able to keep River Bluff open. Like Mr. Schultz said, they're doing great things out there. Just tonight, we changed the wages of the CNAs. We're making good changes. We'll move forward in a very good way out there. I agree with Mr. Schultz and what Mr. Rickard had says, and I agree with you. We get one good year. And we're not asking for ever, but for this year, it does not make sense to raise your taxes. People should be excited that we get to maintain and keep River Bluff, and they don't have to spend more this year. I think that's an exciting thing. And then you had asked last time that there was an advisory referendum that wasn't acted upon, and I believe Ms. Vaughn found 33 years ago, they were approved to max the levy.
That was the last time.
Sure, but you were
They've
asking.
been asking for many years. You can ask the previous people, our previous chairman, Scott Christensen, said they tried it 4 times, because he called me the morning when that thing went through and wanted to know how we did that, because for years they've been trying to raise that levy. And that's what happens. Do it when you can.
Point of order, I believe Board Member McDonald has the floor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. McDonald?
My comments are finished. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Ms. Goro, did you want to speak for one more time?
I was going to speak one more time, and now you made me forget.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I know what I was going to say. I want it in writing from this board that if times start getting bad again, the first thing you're going to do is raise that levy for River Bluff. Until I see that in writing, I don't believe any of you, to be honest with you, and neither does
Ms.
the
Goro?
taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goro. All right, Mr. Delgado.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood where we were at. We are going to, we were going to have a finance meeting next week, but there's really not a whole lot to discuss. And so we just wanted to give the staff a little bit more time to prepare. So September 22nd, we'll have our finance meeting, and then we'll move forward on the final board meeting on that. All right, that concludes our report. Thank you very much.
Mr. Delgado. Very good. Zoning Committee, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank goodness we have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Economic Development Committee, Mr. Sweeney.
Hello, Board. I just want everyone to know where we're at with economic development tonight. We have 2 resolutions approving 2 different requests, Group 2 and Group 3 of the American Rescue Plan, our discretionary projects that we've put forth. And I would like to make a motion to take them together. First one is resolution approving the American Rescue Plan funds for Economic Impact Program for the Chairman's Initiative Group 2 projects. And the second one is all the same verbiage except for Group 3 projects, and I so move them together.
Moved by Mr. Sweeney to Group C2 and 3 resolutions for the American Rescue Plan Phase 2, Project 2, and Group 3, correct?
Correct, sir.
All right. We got a second by Ms. Fellers. Any discussion, Mr. Sweeney, from your chair?
None for me, no.
Board member discussion. Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to approving those 2 resolutions? Good. Yes for all members present.
All right. Thank you. We will have a meeting on the 12th, this next Monday at 5:30 in room 303.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Operation Administrative Committee, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Operations Committee has 2 resolutions, 2 ordinances for this evening. The first resolution establishing the date, time, and location of each meeting of the Winnebago County Board, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Huffman. Discussion, Mr. McDonald? No discussion, board member discussion? Mr. Earl?
Thank you, Chairman. A question relating to the last Economic Development Committee. Was the motion to combine the 2 together, was that the motion?
Yes.
And we voted yes on that motion? Do we have to vote again to approve the 2, or did we
I think
do
it was
that?
a motion to
Move them
incorporate
together.
both.
Move them together.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. This resolution. Any questions? Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Please cast a yes for all members present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution awarding electricity services, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Mr. McDonald.
He was here a long time.
I've been up there all the time.
I'm going to have some more chocolate.
Apologies.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second. Mr. Delgado, seconds. Is there any discussion?
There is, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So what we need to do, and I believe we need to do this in the form of an amendment, so the electricity rates are good for today. So all of you guys should have on your desks the current rates that are effective today. There's an email from our broker, and in the email, she says, I would recommend taking the 3-year term during this time of so much instability in energy markets. This 3-year term will also allow the county board to be locked into a fixed rate until we can get through our presidential election. We have many clients that agree when we say the current energy policies in our country will do nothing to put relief on pricing. Not my statement, it's our broker's statement. As you see in the handout, the 36-month, 3-year, for whatever is 7.5 cents, that's the least expensive. Overall, it is a 40% increase. I want to be clear about that. Our electric bill is going to go up at least 40%. But I would move to do the 36-month at 7.5%. I think I would need a second for that amendment.
So moved by Mr. McDonald to select the 36-month estimate, second by Ms. Crosby. Is there discussion on that? Mr. Arena.
So this is from Aggressive Energy, that's the company that we're talking about, right? The one that's highlighted in green? And that's the supplier?
I'm sorry, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Arena.
And so the last one we had that was 40% less, was that also set 3 years ago?
Ms. Johns is indicating yes.
Okay, all right.
I remember that from committee as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Any further questions? Okay, are there any board members opposed to this amendment to this resolution? Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Then I so move the resolution.
Moved by Mr. McDonald for the amended resolution, second by Mr. Lindmark. Any discussion? Ms. Fellers.
I just have a quick question. Does our broker receive a commission for this sale?
I don't know that for sure. Ms. Johns, can you speak to that?
Ms. Johns?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. If you look at the quote, you'll see she does identify that on the quote form. I put mine away already. It's, here it is. At the very bottom, they get a small percent, it's 0.005, and it's paid by the energy provider.
Very good.
And they do the city of Rockford, I mean, they do all the counties around here. They're very good.
Thank you, Ms. Johns. Ms. Fellers, was that
I'm doing math.
doing math?
Okay, thank you. No
Okay.
further questions.
Any further questions? Are there any board members opposed to this amended resolution? Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next two items are ordinances that are being read in to be laid over. The first ordinance amending section 2-65 and 2-72 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinances, and again, that's to be laid over. Item 5 is ordinance amending section 2-81 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinances, and that is also to be laid over.
Very good. Both items are laid over.
That concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All right, Public Works Committee, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no report.
Thank you. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chairman. No report, and I just want to say happy birthday to you. And there must be a full moon out there, I think. One more cocktail hour before board, apparently. Huh? No, I'm kidding.
What? Diabetes, the
I
sugars.
kid.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chairman.
it. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before the board tonight? Hearing none, okay. We'll move on to new business. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to submit to the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee a resolution that I've talked to a handful of members about and hope to seek additional co-sponsors on it when it gets there. But it is my hope that this county joins a chorus of Illinois county sheriffs, Illinois state's attorneys, their associations on a statewide basis in opposing the Safety Act and hoping for its repeal in the Illinois State Legislature. I believe it's a piece of legislation that you almost have to pinch yourself to think, is it really that bad? And it really is that bad. There's a number of whereases in this resolution that I'm submitting But all in all, I believe that it will certainly put the citizens of this county in a position to be less safe from a criminal standpoint, and aspects of it are absolutely an infringement on private property rights to individuals that live in this county through the modifications of the trespassing laws. So I'm going to refer that to Mr. Earl's committee for consideration.
Very good. So the resolution that was prepared by Mr. Sweeney is being referred to the Public Safety Judiciary Committee. I believe everyone should have a copy on their desk at this time.
I'm going to leave copies on the back table immediately adjourning the meeting.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any other new business? Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to Mr. Sweeney's resolution. I have had the opportunity to see it, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Mr. Arena would be like to add it as a co-sponsor. Thank you. Mr. Webster.
You can add my name to that as well.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McDonald, Ms. Crosby, Mr. McCarthy, the entire board. Raise your hand if you do not want to be a sponsor. Okay, Ms. Fellers and Mr. Neighbors, so everybody else. I think they'll do that in committee more. Okay.
It's very scary.
Any other business, new business? Are there any announcements or communications, Clerk Gamal?
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Very good. Communications by board members. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Not this next weekend, but the weekend after, which is the 17th and 18th, is the PEC thing at the Winnebago County Fairgrounds. 500 dealers, rain or shine, antique tools, yard art, stamps, furniture, holiday decor, so much more. PEC Fairgrounds, or I'm sorry, Winnebago County Fairgrounds and PEC, the 17th and 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Mr. Lindmark.
Yeah, there's going to be an event at Swanson Stadium, which is Guilford High School's football field, in honor of those lost in 9/11. There's going to be it's called Hero Climb, climbing 110 flights of stairs to honor those fallen at 9/11.
Thank you, Mr.
It runs from 12 to 4 p.m.
Thank you. Ms. Redd?
Thank you, Chairman. I put an ad on each of your desks, so if you're running for an office, you might want to place an ad in the program booklet.
Thank you, Ms. Redd.
Thank you.
And I believe there's also a Rosco Fall Parade this weekend on Sunday. Mr. Schultz.
You just got ahead of me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The Rosco Fall Festival begins at Friday night at 5 p.m. and it goes through Sunday. And there is a parade on Sunday morning. I understand there are voluminous amounts of candy that are thrown, sometimes viciously, but mostly in goodwill.
That's correct. We'll try to keep the throwing down to a minimum this year.
We only have
Ms.
one more
Gore.
thing. If you didn't go to the parade last Monday, you really missed it. My son-in-law drove me through, and when we got done, he said that was the greatest day he's had in a long time. He says, I've never seen such a selection of people out there, from kids all the way up to people in wheelchairs and everything else, and how happy they were, and how they were wishing everybody a happy Labor Day. And he says, I haven't been with people that happy for a long time. He says, I'm so happy I drove today. He says, it made me feel so good just to see them. So we have a lot of citizens out there that still have a lot of spunk in them.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Next to me.
Move to adjourn by Mr. Webster, second by Mr. McCarthy. Are there any board members opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
You know,